Hello and welcome everybody. You are tuning into the BoF live session on the evolving art of luxury experiential retail. Now, before I dive into any introductions, I have a couple of logistical and administrative points to cover off. We know that BoF has a very global community and we love knowing where exactly you are tuning in from today. So feel free and don't be shy and pop in your location into the chat box. However, if you have a question for one of our panelists, please use the Q&A function instead, as that ensures that we're not going to miss your question. It will be a very busy chat. And then finally, if you need technical support at any point in time, our tech team is standing by to be able to assist, and you can reach them at events@businessofashion.com. So with that, let's get started. So my name is Diana Lee. I'm based in London, and I'm seeing so many different people from Montreal as well, and Peru, at Chengdu, China. Fantastic. So love this. This is such global representation. This is fabulous for the very topic that we're going to be talking about today. So that topic is on the evolving art of luxury experiential retail. And I am very delighted today to be presenting my three panelists, and we'll be unpacking some of the takeaways from this very special report that was created in conjunction with Royalmount, which is an upcoming luxury shopping district based out of Montreal, Canada, hence my excitement earlier. And so with me, I have the very great pleasure of introducing Andrew Lutfy. He is the Chief Executive Officer of Carbonleo, which is the real estate developer behind Royalmount. And also, we're very lucky because Andrew is the visionary behind the concept of Royalmount. We have David Gester, who is the Chief Development Officer of Catterton Real Estate. And finally, we have Victor Luis, who is the Chief Executive of Moose Knuckle. And so, gentlemen, over to you. I'd love to give the floor to each of you just to be able to get a bit more information about what you're working in, the capacity that your company functions in as well. So, Andrew, why don't we start with you?
Thank you. And this is what a pleasure to be here. This is really exciting, and good morning or good afternoon to everyone. And really nice to see the representation around the world, Toulouse, France, Milan. This is amazing. Andrew Lutfy, yes, I'm the CEO of Carbonleo. Carbonleo's development company, but more importantly, I'm the owner, and I guess the co-owner, I should say, with David Gester and LCRE, but co-owner of Royalmount. And listen, we're going to be speaking about Royalmount. Royalmount's super exciting. My backstory is retail as well, two brands, and very active with those brands. One of the brands is Garage. Garage is busy expanding throughout North America, as well as Dynamite. So I do understand, the consumer from the retail perspective, and now from the real estate and the real estate development perspective. And ultimately, it's just about making people happy. That's the common thread. Thank you, Diana.
Thank you. And David, over to you.
Sure. Hi, and good day, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. David Gester, I'm head of development for Catterton Real Estate, which is part of the private equity group Catterton. My background, a little bit different than Andrew's. I started as an architect for many years, then moved into retailing and worked for LVMH as part of their DFS group, and then ultimately transitioned as another part of the LVMH group into their private equity funds, and laterally now that's transitioned into Catterton. So we're partnering on real estate developments like Royalmount with Andrew around the world, including Miami Design District, where I am currently, and G6 in Tokyo, for those of you who are in the Far East.
Thank you. And last but not least, Victor.
Hi, everybody. Thank you, Diana, for the opportunity, and Andrew, as well as David. Glad to sit on this panel with all of you. I have about 30 years experience in retail and luxury, the first half of my career within the LVMH group out in the Asia Pacific, most of that based out of Tokyo. And then later on with Coach, running that business in Japan, Asia Pacific, globally. And then later on as CEO, developing it to Tapestry, which it is today through the acquisitions of Stuart Weitzman and Kate Spade. And since 2019 have been active as an investor with my family and a few brands globally, one or two actually out of Italy, and Moose Knuckles based out of Canada, where I currently also lead that business, Moose Knuckles Canada out of Montreal, which is one of the fastest growing outerwear brands in the luxury outerwear space. Thank you.
Thank you all for those introductions. I'm looking forward to a very energetic and cohesive discussion today. And so once again, my name is Diana Lee. I'm the Director of Research and Analysis at BoF Insights. And this is the newest team within the business of fashion. And we are the think tank and data unit and research arm at the company. And our mission is to be able to arm senior fashion and creative leaders with the proprietary data and information that they need to make better business decisions. And I hope many of you that are joining today will have read some of our earlier reports about customers in the Middle East, or diving into styles and trends for designer handbags and designer shoes, or better understanding the relationship that Gen Zers have with fashion. Now, today, as I mentioned, it's a very special report because it was done in collaboration with Royalmount, which is an upcoming luxury shopping district in Montreal. And this is a massive undertaking. Ultimately, it's going to have 170 plus brand stores and 60 plus restaurants. So it is really going to be a very exciting project. And so with that, if we could please pull up the presentation. Our agenda for today is as follows, where I'm going to run through this presentation very quickly. Then we're going to move into our moderated conversation, and time permitting, I'm hoping to tackle one or two audience questions. So thank you to everybody that submitted questions beforehand, and also keep those questions coming in the Q&A box. Thank you very much. All right, fantastic. So let's dig into the evolving art of luxury experiential retail. And so with this particular report, we really wanted to be able to tackle these burning questions about what luxury customers are looking forward to in stores, how that differs from the past, and what brands and retailers can do today in order to set themselves up for success in what is an increasingly competitive environment. And of course, we wanted to be able to share those results with a wider group. So the snippet that I am sharing today has been modified for presentation purposes. So I highly encourage everybody to actually go to our website and download the full report, which is available on a complimentary basis. And my colleague is going to be able to pop that link into the chat, so you will be able to download and read away. Now, to answer those high-level questions that I mentioned a little bit earlier, we took a two-pronged approach to the data, where we interviewed nearly 20 executives across beauty, fashion, hospitality, really to understand what were the best-in-class practices. And we coupled that with the results from a proprietary survey of customers in the US and Canada. And then we took that population and we defined that further by looking at people who lived in an urban center, and then we further filtered that down to customers that we defined as frequent luxury customers, meaning that they visit a luxury store at least once a year. And so with that, you can understand the context of our report and where our findings are coming from. So let's get started. Now, many of us are only all too familiar with how our work and our social lives were pushed online in the midst of the pandemic. However, that e-commerce surge has not been fully sustained. And so the behaviors were not necessarily all sticky. And so the IMF, or the International Monetary Fund, estimates that the current share of e-commerce as a percentage of the total spend is about 12%. And that's less than 1 percentage point higher than if the pandemic had not happened. So clearly this e-commerce surge has not been fully maintained. And that's why we're seeing news such as the tech layoffs. And so clearly there is an appetite for in-person shopping, and that desire is alive and well. And we see that in our own data as well. So we asked our frequent luxury customers in the US and Canada about how they prefer to join brand communities, how they prefer to resolve customer service issues, and also about learning brand stories and values and their preference for going online versus offline. So the way you read this, let's take the leftmost column as an example. 38% of our respondents said that they prefer to join a brand community in store, and an additional 32% said that these channels were equally important. And that gives us a total of 70% of luxury shoppers that want to involve the store in some way. So you can see that stores continue to be extremely pivotal in the overall customer journey. There's a similar statistic when it comes to resolving customer service inquiries. And the last column is interesting because there's actually a greater preference to go online to learn about a brand story. And this very clearly to me is an opportunity for brands and retailers to train their sales associates and enable them to give customers an experience and an education that just can't be replicable at home. Now, another interesting stat that we found through the course of our research is just on the frequency of luxury store visits. So what we found is that customers in North America, about a third of those visit a luxury store at least monthly, and more than half visit at least once every 3 months. And so really the onus is on brands and retailers to be able to deliver something novel each time that someone steps into those stores. And so this is really the crux of the report, which is, as we've seen, the desire to go into stores is alive and well, but those stores cannot be the same experience as they were prior to the pandemic. What we heard from our luxury shoppers in North America was that there were much higher expectations around elements such as digital integration, environmental standards, and also expecting stores to be a place of inspiration. So we can see that 2/3 of our respondents said that they expect higher levels of digital integration. And that can be everything from having the digital tools to be able to facilitate the customer journey or being able to have their customer profile be recognized. Similarly, 61% of respondents said that they expected higher environmental standards in stores. And nearly half of our respondents said that the store should be more than a place to simply buy luxury products. So while you might be walking out of a store with a product, that's not your primary driver more and more so. And so I think that will be a very interesting shift in consumer behaviors. So this brings us to our 3 pillars that we've oriented the report around. And these 3 pillars are really the ways in which brands and retailers are going to be able to strategize around in order to meet and even exceed those customer expectations that we just saw laid out in the prior slide. And so what we have here is supercharged connectivity. And that pillar is essentially around being able to leverage technology to create deeper and more meaningful human relationships. Then our second pillar is around sustainability, which is all about raising the bar when it comes to environmental and social responsibility. And our last pillar is around inclusive luxury, which is all about offering something for everyone with an emphasis on long-term engagement rather than immediately trying to convert someone into a sales. And so that is a perfect segue into our moderated conversation. We're going to be able to dive into each one of these 3 pillars in much more detail. But for now, the floor was going to go over to Andrew, David, and Victor. So David, I want to start with you because there's a lot going on in the worlds of technology with the amazing progress that we've seen in artificial intelligence, the continued developments in the metaverse or augmented reality. I wanted to ask about the report findings and how you think that dovetails to some of the larger retail and technological trends that you see in your capacity at Catterton Real Estate.
Thanks. I think in the report, Susan Santos from ASIP probably hit that point almost exactly where I would share it, which is the integration of technology needs to be a lot more seamless and build something that allows customers and guests to customize their experience, perhaps get a little bit more deeper in the information, and really tailor it to their needs. But it needs to be seamless. It shouldn't be such hard work. And I think where she kind of translated was that leads to a better connectivity in the building of community. And I think in our developments, including Royalmount, that community is provided with things in which to engage. So that may be art, it might be events, it might be social media backdrops, it could be our public space. But all of those sort of human gathering points, I think, are what really is about that connectivity and the driving of community. And I think she hit it right.
Thank you for that. And Andrew, I think this is a perfect jumping off point for you to talk about Royalmount. So starting big with overall trends and what we're seeing, and then let's get more specific and have Royalmount really be the example of a shopping district. So any comments to what David just said?
Yeah, sure. Listen, I think the way we look at it is really pretty simple. It's really about removing pain points, removing friction. If you could leverage technology to remove friction, and you think about the journey from approaching, the shopping center or the asset to your navigation through it, if you could remove friction along the way, I think that's a big plus. Of course, along the way, you are gathering data, and if you could be useful and mindful in your ability to, leverage the CRM to further remove pain points that's pretty real. And if I give you an example, as we think about our asset is located in the 8th densest 15-minute PTA in North America. So it's a very, very, very dense sector of Montreal, densely populated, that is. And consequently, there's a lot of cars, and we have, of course, all the parking is underground. So it's 100% pedestrian, everything is underground. So it's controlled parking. And, the idea is we need to control the parking. Otherwise, it'll become a park and ride. So we do need to control the parking. And we also want to offer our 5-star customers an elevated experience. So what does that really mean? You're pulling up to the asset, you're pulling up to the shopping center, you're pulling up to Royalmount. We recognize you immediately. A nice welcome, whatever your nickname is, we welcome you by your nickname. The gate opens up. If you're a 5-star customer, you're directed to whatever is your preference, to your personalized parking, or to the valet, or to an available parking spot. You want to find your car, no problem. You don't remember really where you parked. You've been there for 6 hours, navigate right back to your car, and exiting is touchless and seamless. I think that's pretty useful, and of course, we've got examples like that. Examples, we're going to be very much embedded with art. So being able to navigate the asset, approach a piece of art, and all of a sudden, you get an augmented reality and you learn more about the artist or about the piece. Again, useful use cases.
Well, thank you, Andrew. I love that example about the parking, because I think while I would really enjoy something like that, the debate and the balance between technology is always between being useful to someone and being intrusive. So I would love to get your thoughts around how do you strike the appropriate balance, and how do you make sure to gauge the level of customer comfort?
I think as a brand, and I think of Royalmount as a brand, if we're pushing marketing, I don't think we're being very useful. Of course, we can do a great job with personalization, and we could be very, very relevant, but I think you're being invasive at that point. I'm not really crazy about that. I really do believe listen, first things first, let's just remove the pain points. Let's recognize you. You're maybe purchasing something, online, and it might be food, it might be product, it might be something like that. You want to kind of like fly through our click and collect and have the valet loaded into your trunk. And, I think these are amazing use cases for technology. Again, removing pain points, removing friction, therefore building frequency, habit, loyalty, engagement, net promoter score. I think first and foremost, let's just nail that, and then we can figure out how we start pushing anything to you. But I'd be very conscious about not overly pushing, or not even pushing at all.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And right now, the assumption of technology that we're using is more of the customer facing front. So how do we remove these pain points for customers? How do we appeal to them in the customer journey? And so, Victor, I wanted to switch gears a little bit and ask about technology as it applies to sales associates, because that can also be a game changer and very much an enabler. So can you tell us a little bit about technology that can be in use in stores that really benefits your sales associates? And how do you think about, so like two-parter question, how do you then think about allocating resources between the tools that go for your sales associates versus those that go for the customer?
Sure. First, thank you, Diane, and to BoF for making the study available. And I want to thank Andrew for supporting that, because I think there's a lot of great insights there that everyone listening can benefit from. Anyone who's been to Montreal knows that we lack a great context for luxury brands to exist. And for sure, Royalmount will help us solve that. And that context is important from a platform perspective for our sales associates as well, who have to sell and exist in the store. So a lot of the technology that Andrew and his team are working on will only support our team in being able to do their job better. When I think of connectivity, the most important asset that we have is our sales associates globally, without a doubt. It really correlates with everything that you found in the study in terms of the importance of stores and those personal relationships that consumers can and should be creating, and the sense of community that the store can create, in which our associates are truly the best ambassadors, the best influencers for our brand and what we want to do in creating community. When we think about investment and capital allocation now in connectivity directly, whether it be our website or other things that we do, or providing tools to our sales associates, that's as you, I think, are hinting, a very, very hard choice. We tend, as a smaller business and fast-growing business, to want to ensure that the most real connections, those that are happening physically and live, can happen as seamlessly as possible and with as much information and support to the sales associates. So we do tend to provide more support in that area, whether that be, as you've suggested, some of the basic tools that are now table stakes, whether that be Wi-Fi or access to product info, access to consumer information, so that when a customer's coming into the store, we know what they have purchased or where their tastes may be, providing the right environment in store for someone who's not shopping but is supporting someone who is shopping. And just ensuring that that whole transactional process is not truly a transaction, but an emotional connection, and that the environment supports that. One of the pieces of technology that we have invested in as a young brand that I think for our company our size is quite substantial is putting an NFC RFID chip into every single garment that we sell. Not just for the inventory purposes, which obviously helps the flow of inventory coming in and out of stores, not only in our own locations, but third parties, but with a much longer term vision and how we can utilize that technology directly with customers and also indirectly via our sales associates. We're working right now on a base platform that will allow us to put an NFC and leverage the blockchain to actually ensure that when a customer comes in, they can take that item home, they can then authenticate it if they choose to. We obviously look to provide garments that have a very substantial lifetime, but if they choose to resell it, they can do so with the authenticity, to provide them as well with digital assets that they can use in the metaverse, linking that technology to a much longer term vision. We're in the very early process there, but that's something that will be helpful not only to our sales associates, but also directly allow us to connect with consumers. And I think the best technologies should allow for both. They should allow for support of the sales associates as well as directly with consumers, including, of course, our website and anything else that we're doing.
Right. Well, thank you for that, Victor. And it reminds me of, David, what you led us off with to say the quote from ESOP's Chief Customer Officer, Suzanne Santos, about how the technology is really just an implement used by a sales associate in order to get closer to the customer. And I wanted to bring you back into the conversation as well, just piggybacking off of what Victor was just saying, because there is a lot of different technology that is out there. And so NFC chips, very helpful for things like authentication, metaverse, that feels quite a bit further away. So just from your perspective as an investor and as someone who has to think about the future of developments, how do you determine when something is gimmicky versus something that really has legs?
Tough question, that. I'm not sure if I guess it's when it has a usefulness, right? If it has a long-term usefulness, it becomes less of a gimmick. If it becomes a gimmick or a fad, it's going to go out of fashion pretty quickly. Not to say that they're not effective. I mean, I would build on some of those gimmicks and fads and capitalize it, particularly as we market projects. We have talked in Miami about one of our new developments of creating it preemptively in the metaverse, creating it preemptively because it's a residential project where we've created the ability to actually buy a condo in the sky in the metaverse as a precursor to actually buying it in reality. So you could enjoy the same condo with the same visits in the future, but it's a piece of the blockchain, it's a piece of the metaverse. And sure, it's a bit of a gimmick and a bit of a sale, but there is some functionality because you can use that same tool to plan the interior spaces, to take a look at what your furniture or your art might look like in your condo and contemplate all that. So there is a long-term piece to something like that, but to me, it's also probably going to have a shelf life.
Okay, thank you for the insightful answers. Oh, yes. Do we have?
I was gonna say, I go back to being useful. I really go back. And it's funny. One of the words I really loathe is the word cool, because cool. If you design, if you think about a gadget or you think about a digital tool or something, you're going to describe it as being cool. What does cool really, really mean? It just means it's novel. and it's interesting. It doesn't mean it's useful, and it doesn't mean you'll ever use it again. It's got a very short shelf life, generally speaking. So I do like the idea of being, developing tools that have a broad appeal and that speak to people's values, to our customers' values, right? And to us as a society and our values. So, one of our tools is going to be an app. We're going to have the Royalmount app, and yes, it's going to remove all different issues around pain points and friction points and so on and so forth. But more and more sustainability. We'll be talking about that later on. But sustainability is a huge thing, and we are going to great lengths to connect Royalmount into the metro system. Montreal's metro system, for those around the world, Montreal's metro system has the second highest ridership per capita in North America after Manhattan. So this metro subway, community is super important to us. And what's wrong with every time you take the metro and you're walking through our overpass, tapping your phone or whatever it is and earning leaves or something like that, call it sustainability points as we think about, building CRM, building loyalty points, that it could be redeemed for services or perhaps products. It's not just about, cars and parking and so on and so forth, but it could be very, very much tied into sustainability. At the end of the day, it's about being useful and I think being relevant to each of our customers. And we have a quite, diverse array of customers, but we need to be relevant.
Well, thank you so much for
I
that.
do think Royalmount's going to be pretty cool, though, Andrew. I know you may hate the word, but you're going to own it a little bit.
Happy. I like happy. I like happier. I like happier better than cool.
Well, Andrew, that was such a good reminder as well, as that even though we've presented those three pillars as feeling like they're very discrete items, the reality is that they will very much bleed and they'll overlap into one another. So technology can be an enabler for sustainability in terms of tracking and measuring and continuing to progress on that front. And it can also assist with inclusive luxury. So that's a very good reminder. So thank you for that. And this is a good chance to actually talk about our second pillar, which is around sustainable retail. So this, once again, is about raising the bar when it comes to environmental and social responsibility. And again, this is something that became more important during the pandemic because more people were spending time in nature. We got to see air and water quality improve because there was a reduction in global travel. But the question is, how does this impact people on a day-to-day when it comes to shopping decisions? And so, Victor, I actually wanted to start with you for this section and just ask about, from your experience, whether that was at Tapestry or currently at Moose Knuckles, but how do you see the degree of importance that customers place on sustainability? And is it really discernibly different in terms of what people are asking for and what they're demanding?
Yeah, I think it's obviously the importance increasing dramatically. I mean, all of us see it at home, whether it's I have teenage and kids in their 20s for whom it's a significant part of the discussion at the dinner table on a nightly basis, to discussions at home with our parents. So it really has no age, and quite frankly is a part of everyone's consideration set today. So whether that be shopping. And I think that in the fashion industry, especially, we know that we work in a business that's more or less flawed. It's especially something which a lot of us have been focused on most recently. In the case of Moose Knuckles, our focus has been on driving products that have and garments that have a long life. We're not in the fast fashion business. And most recently, for example, we made a decision at the end of 2022 to stop the production of all fur, and we're very much focused on sustainable materials and sustainable garments, with a commitment that all of our products will use from 2022 byproducts of the food industry. So whether that be our down, which is all RDS certified, shearling and leather, really taking care of animal welfare. I think that when we look at how consumers come into the shopping experience and we listen to our sales associates, it's very much top of mind. So they do ask us about whether our materials are recycled or not recycled, organic, and all of these things play into, of course, our own development cycle. So we have a full-time person in-house, Tara, who drives our sustainability strategy. And I think what's most important in what we're doing is we're starting at the very beginning of the design process. So from the sourcing of materials down to designing into it, and later on, of course, the recyclability of the material and hopefully giving products a second life, which is something that we're working on right now.
Great, thank you. And let's apply design when it comes to buildings as well. So clearly you can design when it comes to products and processes, but David, given your background as a trained architect, it would be really interesting to hear what are some of the guidelines that developers and designers can use today just to make sure that sustainability is actually incorporated from the outset.
Yeah, it's funny. When I was an architect, practicing architect, LEED was in its infancy, and everybody was trying to talk about, getting LEED points and LEED certifications. And LEED became, now it's just the bare minimum entry ticket. It's the kind of like, okay, yeah, certifications are great. LEED certification we go for, particularly gold and above on all of our projects. But there's so much more now that people are really focused on the whole spectrum of the ESG kind of output. So environmental being piece, carbon right now is obviously at the forefront. And in one of our projects in South Bay Social District in LA, we're actually doing an embodied carbon neutral project because we're adaptively reusing an existing structure for our project. So it's not just about the life cycle energy use like we are doing at Royalmount, because in Royalmount, we're trying to do that life cycle operational carbon neutrality with a minimization of carbon credits. And that whole greenwashing thing, I think, is going to come to the fore as well, where carbon credits are going to start to be attacked, where you got to really save the carbon and not let somebody else do it on your behalf. So there's a lot we're doing at kind of big picture stuff to reduce energy use, to try to reduce carbon use in the construction of our buildings or not use it at all. So we're still at the infancy, I think, in the carbon cycle in terms of doing that, but we are targeting it.
And
It's a
Andrew,
great point. I was just going to add, Diane, I think it's a great point
please.
on the greenwashing and specifically on the carbon offsets, because in some ways it's kind of like saying it's okay to sin and you can pay for it, right? By allowing a farmer not to cut down his trees, if that's the case, which obviously
we'll be carbon neutral in 50 years. Well, none of us are going to be around. So what did we do?
Correct. And none of us will be. And so we've been looking very much at just looking at where in our supply chain that happens and then truly making those tough decisions across biodegradable plastics, looking at, of course, what we're doing with hangers and moving from wood to using ocean waste. All of these things are steps that can be taken rather than actually looking to pay someone else to cover your sins, if you will.
Right. Okay. And David, you mentioned LEED certifications. And so, Andrew, I thought this was a really good point to talk a little bit about Royalmount certifications, because it's going to be the only 100% carbon neutral mixed use development in Canada. So that is quite a feat. And I wanted to ask you specifically about what is the appeal of that? Like, obviously, for consumers, you can understand that people want to feel good when they can make a decision about where they spend their money. But what's the appeal to brands and retailers, and why does this excite them?
Yeah, good question. I think, listen, it's an alignment of corporate values. I think every brand out there, every decent and serious brand out there, I think appreciates the responsibility that they bear insofar as all things ESG. I believe all companies and all brands have serious initiatives, and at the it's a bit of the wild west. But it all starts with hey, let's take stock of where we are today, and let's get incrementally better year after year. So in that we're a ground up development, we set a very audacious goal of being carbon neutral. So this is the largest carbon neutral commercial development in America. So not North America, not South America, in America, period. We're endeavoring without the use of offsets, as David had mentioned, and also the largest LEED Gold commercial project in Canada. So we've set the bar really, really high. I believe it really aligns with best-in-class brands and their mission and some of their values, of course. So a great alignment, and it's amazing. We've had some of the luxury players, for what it's worth, have been real pioneers, I would say, in championing all things ESG. including, some of the technology luxury players, which will not be named. And more often than not, our experience has been when they come and, really start double clicking on our project and understanding what our infrastructure consists of from an ESG standpoint, from a LEED Gold standpoint, they're blown away. And they end up dropping their asks because our standards are more often than not higher than theirs. So that really feels good. And, listen, it's a lot of money. I'd say our LEED Gold budget is probably maybe close to about $100 million. So all things call it sustainability, about $100 million. That's a lot of money to throw into a development that doesn't have a clear return against it. But it's the right thing to do. We're building this project for decades and generations to come. So listen, you know what? You got to set, this is the first of maybe 20 phases. So granted, it's a big first phase at about 1 million square feet. It's important that you set the stage from the onset and build the various phases accordingly. We're on the world stage. This is a world-class project. We appreciate our responsibility and such. And I think the consumer, although they may or may not be able to articulate it today, it is certainly something that is becoming more and more important to them. And I think the appreciation of what we're doing will only grow as time goes on. But we know it's the right thing to do, and we got to sleep at night, so we're doing it.
For those of you that are curious, you can see the progress of Royalmount behind Andrew, actually, in his background. So just as a quick FYI, like a little fun fact. And I want to conclude this pillar just by talking about the association of sustainable retail with the feeling of wellness. And I know, Andrew, this is something that you're also quite passionate about, just about having the green space. It's the sense of relief. It's the peace of mind. So if you can tell us a little bit about that before we move to our third pillar.
Sure, absolutely. Thank you. Yes. So I think, listen, coming out of, going into COVID, I think there was obviously a certain appreciation for, maybe it was not so tangible, but an appreciation for all things nature, waterfront properties, country homes, so on and so forth. But COVID really, really, really kind of brought us to our knees and really made us appreciate some of the more subtle aspects of life, and more specifically, nature. And there's been a real appreciation for slow living, in my opinion, slow living, nature, happy cities. And that's ultimately what we have brought to Royalmount. So Royalmount has the centerpiece of Royalmount, half indoor, half outdoor, but the centerpiece is a 3-acre urban park. So it's not a concrete piazza with planters, it's a park, a real park. And every month we keep looking at the plan and we try to remove mineral components, pavers and so on, and put in more plant beds and more water and more grass. We have a 3-kilometer, once fully developed, a 3-kilometer New York style high line. We call it the Champ-Libre. So all these elements, if you will, afford what I call slow living. And I believe that's really luxurious, to be able to go into an environment in a very urban setting, and your heart rate should maybe drop by 10 or 15 beats per minute, and you feel rejuvenated, you feel life growing around you, and you see leaves moving and whatnot. I think that is quite a luxury. It's intangible. Of course, it does all these wonderful LEED things, but it really, I think, drives and supports emotional wellness, and it becomes that you can't really explain why you feel good being in the environment, but you do. And listen, the fact that we have about 60 restaurants, as you mentioned, I'd say 2/3 of them all have terraces, if you will, that border this park. It really adds to the connectivity, which is not only digital, but human connectivity, the sustainability, the emotional wellness, of course, the luxury, the fact that we're 100% pedestrian. I think we're creating an important ecosystem here.
Well, that leads us very nicely to our third and final pillar around inclusive luxury. And the truth is that the definition of luxury is very much changing. And it really is about offering something to everyone and not having an immediate sales focus, but about engaging them in a lot of different ways. And so Andrew, actually, let's stick with you about this, because a shopping district that has many kinds of restaurants and many kinds of stores, you've got a little bit more flexibility to play around in terms of the amenities and the programming than any individual brand who can only have, like, let's say, one store in that district. So can you tell us a little bit about what consumers are looking for when it comes to that mix of shopping, dining, entertainment? Like, what are going to be the most attractive features for people?
Yeah, great question. I think, I know. I think, because, it lacks confidence. So I do know. 100 years ago and 500 years ago, we had city centers and we had high streets and everyone would gather there, and we had piazzas and communities would come together, and it was amazing. It was vibrant, multi-generational, and so on and so forth. And then we went, I guess, over the last 50 years, the cars kind of took over popularity, and we became a car-based society. And all these developments, all of a sudden, were very far and remote. And you had to drive to this destination, drive to that destination. And I think the pendulum swung to, there you go, I just said it. Well, I know the pendulum, in my opinion, swung too far to the left. Let's bring it back, into the center. And I think the center is basically a live, work, play, a community, a 15-minute city, if you want to call it. We call it a popsicle city. Really, it's a development the size of which that, on a not too hot summer day, you can walk the entire property, in the same time that you would enjoy a popsicle. But somewhere where you live, you work, you play, multi-generational, you're emotionally rejuvenated. You've got your retail therapy, of course. You experience the brands, you experience the art. There's a segregation between human and cars. So this idea of cars and people all on the same plane makes absolutely no sense. So we've separated that. So it's 100% pedestrian, connected into the public transportation and really into the metro system. So if we ever came to a point in our quest for sustainability and the reduction of carbon, if for some reason cars were banned, despite the fact that we're on the axis of two major highways, I think we would fare amazingly well because of our connection into the subway system. And our Montreal subway system, by the way, runs on hydroelectricity, so it's 100% green. So I think, going back to your question, a single store in a single random location, they're kind of like alone, and really the consumer is far more educated and really is far more discerning, right? Maybe because of social media or because of travel, because of whatever. Fundamentally, they want it all, and they don't want to have to schlep from location to location in their car. So they'd like to actually get rid of their car. So that's ultimately what we're providing, and I think that makes a lot of sense for the next 50 and the next 100 years and foreseeable future.
And thank you for providing that perspective. And so, Victor, I wanted to go from your vantage point, because clearly you are leading a brand. And for me, inclusive luxury is also very much about audience development. So it's about being able to tap into a younger demographic and being able to capture that mind share. And eventually they will grow into that earning power as well. But can you tell me a little bit about what inclusive luxury would mean to a brand like Moose Knuckles?
Sure. And you nailed it, Diane. I think from a business development perspective, vital to have the young consumers as one of the fastest, if not the fastest, growing outerwear luxury brand. That has been very much at the core of our success. Our consumer is urban. He or she lives in major cities, whether that be Montreal, Toronto, New York, Chicago, London, Dusseldorf, of course, Seoul, Shanghai, Beijing, where we have physical presence, either direct or through our partners. And therefore, a lot of what Andrew is discussing is very, very important to him or her, right? And that's the context. So yes, of course, the convenience of everything that Andrew discussed in terms of the physical environment, but also emotionally what they're engaged in as young consumers in these cities. We have very long winters in Canada. And what we're creating for us as a brand, and what was so attractive to us about Royalmount, is the opportunity to have that context, but also one in convenience, but also that's culturally relevant. And I'm going to, again, disagree with Andrew a little bit. That's also pretty cool. Our customer engages with hip hop and music and basketball. All of these are kind of city activities. So for us, how do we connect with them? We participate with them in a lot of these activities. So we've been supporting Rolling Loud, the hip hop music festivals in most of these major cities across the world. Most recently, we also teamed up with the Academy of Canadian Cinema and Television and the Prism Prize, where we are going to support young artists by granting production grants for music videos for young hip hop artists. So these are some of the ways in which we stay connected with our community, trying to stay very much understanding what's important to them and letting them know that those are the things that are also important to us, not just the, again, transaction of a parka, but above and beyond what's important to the community emotionally.
Right. So I've heard the word community a few times. And so, David, I think this is interesting when we think about it from a development perspective, because inclusive luxury, you can cut it by age, you can cut it by demographic, by income, but you could also cut it into two camps of locals that are part of the community versus people who are tourists and who are coming to a development because it's a destination and it's one of the top things to do in a city. And so I wanted to ask your opinion about when you're thinking of developing a shopping district and a project of that nature, how do you make sure that it can actually appeal to both of those camps and offer something for everyone?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. And it is exactly what we try and do in pretty much all of our projects. And I think Andrew started to talk about it. It was this organic growth of a city, right? Over hundreds of years, city centers provided all these things that were people's needs to live, work, and play in a small, concentrated area, whether that be a village or a big city. What we do is harder. We got to create one of those from scratch. And I think we learn the mistakes of, decentralized activities, this area for shopping, this area for working, this area for living, to create a new kind of urban village in all of our projects. I think we successfully have done that in Miami, the design district. And I think the truth is where, say somebody was going to visit your city, one of your friends, family, relatives coming into town and say, where would you take them to on a visit? And in Miami, that's where people have gone to the Miami Design District now. It's representative, they feel, for what's the best. And locals are proud of what we've done there, proud enough to take somebody there. I fully envision that that's exactly what we're going to get here at Royalmount, is that this is going to become the #1 tourist destination. And it's going to become a place where locals are going to show up and show off to their visitors and guests by bringing them there, showing them around, enjoying what we've provided. And I think, ultimately, if we can get the residential permissions that we're looking for, it will become that little midtown village community that we talk neighborhood of Montreal, and it's appropriate for Montreal.
And then a follow-up for you, because we have a global audience and we've heard a lot of global cities also tossed out already with Miami. And earlier, David, you talked about G6 and Ginza in Japan. Victor talked about the global presence that Moose Knuckles has. And so I just wanted to learn a little bit more about how you think about these international developments and how do you think about localizing as well? So how do you make sure that that flavor comes out in every respective locale in a way that really is able to showcase that city?
I think it's really great. I mean, this is going to sound weird, but in Japan, we did a project in Tokyo. It's got a mall, it's got some office space, and it's got a park on the roof. It doesn't sound particularly innovative anymore. It's like, okay, it's a shopping mall, some office space. However, in Tokyo, there is no such thing as a shopping mall. And actually, in all of Japan, there's no such thing as a shopping mall that's mid to high end position. All the shopping malls are kind of big boxes. You might call them power centers. There's nothing like what we created. So it was appropriate to do something innovative, and it created an experience that a local consumer never had before. They could go to a store on a street, or they could go to a department store, and department stores were dominant in the industry, declining in their value proposition. But our experience of what we created in our G6 project in Tokyo was to give the customers an experience that they never had. Now, for somebody in Western Europe or in North America, going to the mall, maybe even if it had office space in front, doesn't sound particularly new. But in Japan and in Tokyo, that was a new experience. And I think we do try to localize what is appropriate for every market. In Miami, to create an outdoor center that was street-based, like, say, Rodeo Drive at the Miami Design District, was what was appropriate there. It was authentic to Miami. And I think that authenticity is a word we get bandied around a lot in what we try to create things. But we're trying to create these things that feel like they've been there forever. We're part of their environment right from the get-go. They never felt like they were just cookie cuttered and stamped in place. And at Royalmount, the creation of the new midtown that we're doing with this live, work, play, popsicle city, I think is exactly what Montreal needs. It's exactly the thing that they need. And it's not going to be the same as what we've done before, but it's going to be appropriate and really resonate with that community in a place that I think all these people are going to come and, as I said, show off to their friends, like, look what we got.
Perfect. Well, thank you, three, for all of your fascinating insights and examples as well, just to show how these three pillars really tie into one another, and also giving us some concrete takeaways of how your respective brands or your developments have been able to actually bring these pillars to life. So with the time that we've got left, I wanted to have our operations team bring up some audience members to ask their questions. So we have to be a little bit patient here because it can take a little bit of time before someone is able to fully load in and have their camera on, but it's always great to be able to hear from an audience member or two. I can see that the chat has been very active and we've got some questions in the Q&A as well. So very grateful for that. Okay, so I can see that our first question is from Candice in Tulsa. And so hopefully she will be joining us shortly. Hello.
Hi. So I had a question surrounding how we engage the customer before and after we get them in person, because I've learned that a lot of people don't like to be touched like via email and digitally as much as they used to. Emails and stuff start to get super invasive. So what is a way for us to start incorporating these things before we get them to us? And then how do we continue that experience after they leave us without being invasive?
Great question. Who's going to take it?
I'll take a little stab at it, Candice. I think in terms of the email is very invasive, right? It's kind of push. So obviously how the website engages consumers through social media platforms and the like, I believe that making it frictionless and allowing the customer to kind of self-direct is quite important in the beginning in terms of their own discovery of a brand. I think post, you nailed something, which is maybe reconsidering, again, writing those thank you notes and thank you cards from a sales associate. That human touch can be so important. We still encourage it. Writing to a customer and saying thank you, and hopefully why not pick up the phone sometimes and say hello if the customer believes that's, if you offer them the opportunity to. I wouldn't obviously call out and ask, but I think offering the customer the opportunity to call, speak with the sales associate, write with the sales associate, personalized emails. And it's different in different markets. I can share with you that in a market like China, for example, where WeChat is vital, those discussions are happening via those platforms, both pre and post the transaction. I think that in the future, what you may see, again, with blockchain, with NFTs and digital wallets, which is none of that is getting a lot of attention right now, given the bust that's happened in crypto. There's so much attention on artificial intelligence and AI and chatbots and the like. But I do believe that there are a lot of projects, some dormant, but a lot continuing in that space that eventually will allow community to take place through the blockchain, where through your digital wallet, you'll have those connections happening pretty automatically, not unlike a WeChat. But
like in simple terms, I would just add to that, it's really about human connectivity. Like as simple as human connectivity. One of our objectives is to be the #1 tagged, Royalmount is going to be the #1 tagged, what do you call it? Tag, if you will. So fundamentally that user generated content for us is critical. We don't really want to generate content. We don't want to do any marketing. We don't really know you. We've never even met, right? But user generated content that is authentic, that is real, that is typically about humans and human connectivity. That's really, I think, what really matters to me. I know that matters very, very much to me. And we want to be the #1, let's say, source of such. And ultimately that creates that authentic, kind of like need to want to discover, want to engage. It'll speak to your brand. It'll speak to your personal brand, and you kind of take it from there. And then again, about being useful and whatnot.
Well, thank you so much, Candace. And so I think we have time for one more question. This question is going to come from Giuseppe from Milan. So we'll just give 1 second for Giuseppe to be able to join us. And then after which we will have to wrap our session. Hi, Giuseppe.
Hello. Thanks for letting me sorry. My question is how to measure the success of experiential retail initiatives and how to optimize the strategies based on data and analytics. Thanks.
Perfect. Can we have just one panelist respond to that question in the interest of time?
Sorry, it was clipping a bit. What was the question?
Sorry, how to measure the success of these initiatives and how to optimize the strategies based on data and analytics.
Sounds good.
Is
well, I could tell you, yeah, absolutely, for sure. Yeah, it's clipping a bit, but I don't know if you can hear me okay, but listen, for us, 70% of our revenue, let's say commercial activity, if you will, that goes through Royalmount, 70% of it, we would like of that revenue, it may be 20% of the customers, but it might be 70% of the revenue. We want it to be, call it attached to a CRM. So with that CRM, we can provide a tremendous amount of useful value to the consumer, again, removing pain points, friction, and so on and so forth, aligned with their values, whether sustainability or click and collect or anything else. But I mean, if you think about that metric, you're talking about 70% of revenue, 20% of customers. That would be a hard metric. The number one tagged, place, if you will, that to me is a very hard metric. If you talk about, you're talking about maybe 50 million media impressions, if you will, a week, that would be a hard metric, and all through user generated content. So there's probably many ways, but what doesn't get measured doesn't get done. So we will be measuring. Great question.
Well, thank you everyone for that. Thank you, Giuseppe. So this brings us to the end of our BoF Live today. I think time has really flown by. So a big thanks to our operational team for enabling this to happen. And of course, thank you to Andrew, David, and Victor for the incredible insight and also for your participation and just how much you've shared with us today. So very grateful for that. And of course, to our audience members, I hope that you'll take the time to look at the full report. That link is available in the chat box where my colleague has dropped in that information. The report is completely free to download. So please read at your leisure and keep an eye out for our calendar for more events from BoF and specifically from BoF Insights. Okay, until next time, thank you, everybody. Take care.